Welcome everyone to week 7 of MK304OL, and on the screen you can see some of the things that we'll be working on today. Some of those were covered in the weekly intro video, but today specifically I'll be taking you through the virtual lab and the application activity dealing with trend mapping, focused specifically on a suitability analysis and using data to determine consumer trends. So some of our some of our goals for this week will be dealing with the cultural and demographic trends in the U.S. So I'll try to be brief and structured here as we move into our virtual lab to give you an overview of that, as well as taking a look at the application activity. And this activity might be a little bit longer in length, so that's why you might see a little bit more of the longer duration of our session here. But to begin, as some highlights, the virtual lab, there will be no product or report to submit with your virtual lab, but as we've done in prior weeks, the purpose of those virtual labs are designed to give you some familiarity and practice with, in this case, suitability planning, dealing with demographic variables and criteria from a spatial analytics perspective to allow you to complete the application activity located below here. So we'll take you through some of the highlights of what you'll need to do for the virtual lab, and then move into an overview of the week 7 application activity. So let's go ahead and select our link here. This is our exercise document, or the document designed to give us an overview of our week 7 virtual lab. And so as we've done in the past, we'll be selecting this link here, the arcgis.com link, so please go ahead and do that. But we're going to be exploring more about the business analyst software and some of the business intelligence principles from, again, the suitability or planning perspective within spatial analytics. So let's go ahead and we'll activate our arcgis.com here. Once that comes up, I'll be right with you. All right, folks, if you were able to select your arcgis.com link there, or if you just went into a browser, whether it's Chrome or whatnot, Google Chrome, either is fine. But we'll go ahead and enter and sign in. So with your sign-in credentials that were provided to you in past weeks, let's go ahead and access our organizational account here. So the next thing that we'll do, and we're just following along at number 4 of your steps right here. Once you're logged into the organization, we're going to select the training option that appears. And from that, at number 5, then we'll click the course catalog, which is something we're all familiar with at this stage. And let's go ahead and click on course catalog, and then we will be searching for analyzing markets. So this is all going to be about more market analytics and whatnot. So let's go ahead and do that. So underneath my name here, I'm going down to training, and then we're moving into our catalog. Again, just what we spoke about in numbers 4. Moving into number 5, we'll go over to course catalog. Now let's search for our course, and then select return, and then we will find here our course that we will be taking. This is about an hour, 15 hour, 30 minutes approximately. And just like what you've done before, go ahead and enter the course and begin the course. And once you're in the course, again, there's nothing that you really need to do. You'll just need to have access to your business analyst application, which we've gone through in the past, weeks, and follow along through the exercises. You will need internet access for this, but then just simply follow the prompts for instructions and navigate your exercises. So there is an exam at the end of the course here. It's not anything that's graded nor required, but it might be good for you to take just to help you reflect upon what were some things that you learned. So here we'll be looking at some tapestry segmentation, how we're using different types of market analyses, and then some of our enhanced tools in business analysts. So this is all about discovering our customers, finding those ideal places for business product services, and analyzing trade areas and strategies to infiltrate those market areas, if you will. So that's a bit of an overview on our week 7 virtual lab. So we'll pause for a minute and then come back to give you an overview of our application activity, which is a little bit more robust, but still it will be, I think, kind of an exciting way to start to incorporate more variables. In past weeks we were looking just at one variable to map, and we were looking at our iPhones and Androids, for example. Now we're going to start to increase the number of variables in an analysis. So we'll be back with you in a few minutes once I get my notes up. All right, folks, we are back. And just as a reminder, the YouTube version of this is also found in your table of contents under the integrity classes, at least for the current version of this course here. But the YouTube version of the recording will be available indefinitely, even if the integrity link for Blackboard goes away, which I suspect it is going away in another year or so. But just want to let you know that you can access this video there too, or if you have any questions, let me know and I can make sure that you get this video in another format. So the purpose of our next section of our video here is to take you through the week 7 application activity, principles of trend analysis. So we're going to be using our business analyst BI software to look at, again, more variables, specific criteria, and how we are actually conducting the first phase of the first, I guess, stage of consumer trend analysis. So let's go ahead and begin. And we'll talk you through the expectations of the 2 to 3 page summary of what it was that you found for your activity here in just a minute. But in general, I'm going to be taking you through some a scaffolding model, like kind of showing you what to do, and then allowing you to go and conduct your own small-scale trend analysis of your choosing. So we'll try to give you the highlights, and then just like what we did back in week 6 and some of the prior weeks, I'll take a break, and I'll give you the highlights, and then we'll take a break. And if you want to continue on with me, you're welcome to do that, or you can stop once we get through the main item highlights here. So let's go ahead and begin. I'm going to open up our week 7 application activity, and I have a hard copy with me in front of me, but let's go ahead and we'll get that opened up here. So we talked about the purpose, and before you begin, so I'd like for you to think about this before you begin. What we'll be doing is developing a demographic profile. So a profile, we spoke of that in weeks prior a little bit. Who is it that we are interested in trying to define from a consumer perspective? So think about a product, service, or a business that you are interested in. And this will relate to your application activity assignment for this week. So think about a product service. So let's say, in past weeks we were trying to increase product sales for iPhones in a geographic area. That would be a product that we're looking at trying to market, perhaps in a geographic area. So who are the consumers then of those iPhones? So smartphone ownership, those more likely to use a smartphone, for example. So if there was something with an iPhone, it might be ages 50 and younger. Maybe there's a certain education that you define. Maybe it's careers. So be thinking about variables. And as we discussed in prior weeks, variables for us are really data layers. So we will be looking for, in this activity, 4 to 5 data variables. So be thinking about those variables for what might define your consumer for who might be utilizing a service or a business or a product. And then we'll be thinking of a study area. So I encourage people to come up with a study area, maybe like the size of the metro, maybe St. Paul, but we don't want this to be, the whole state of Minnesota really, or something so small as Uptown. We want an area that is big enough for us to run our analysis. You'll recall that when we use a lot of GIS modeling, we think about this in terms of scaling. This activity that we're working on, or I'll be taking you through, is going to be at a very macro scale level. So we're not looking to cite a new business or find customers down to the exact street corner or something like that. That's more of a micro analysis, or like what a parcel may be zoned as. We're not worried about that. We're looking at more scales of census blocks or census tracts. So think of it as more macro in nature. So specific criteria, so our variable, for example, that we spoke of earlier, a variable might be age. So we're interested in the age of people. Now the criteria for age might be greater than or equal to 50 years of age. So this becomes our criteria. In other words, the metrics of our variable that we're interested in harvesting out of our data. Another example of a variable might be an income layer, a layer that's broken down what people make. Now the criteria, in other words, what income do we want? If somebody said we want high income, well, what does that mean? Or low income. So for instance, in this case, income might be less than or equal to $40,000 per year. So think about why you are selecting what you did. And for this activity, some of this is just being fun and creative, but it's really important to have justification for what you're doing and why you're selecting what you did. So in the end, we should have 4 to 5 variables along with numeric criteria that defines our variables. So I'd like for you to think about this, have this plan in place before you begin any further. So if you need some time to think about that, just stop now and then come back when you're ready. So the idea with all of the above is that we'll be preparing a 2 to 3 page summary with the guided questions found at the end of the activity. And so if you want to continue on your own without the extra narration here that I'm providing, let's jump down here to number 33. And here are the questions that you'll want to respond to in your little 2 to 3 page summary. So at a minimum, certainly feel free to trailblaze and add more in here as you wish, but in a Word document, create these headings in there and simply respond to them. So letter A, discuss your product, service, or business. Why did you select what you did? Tell me a little bit about that. Maybe it was an observation that you made. Maybe it was something you read about and you wanted to test or market or come up with sample markets. Discuss your study area. Why did you choose the area that you did? Maybe you're just interested in it. Some people look at if there was a restaurant or something like that. What's so unique about this restaurant or this auto body shop that you're seeing springing up, or different franchise locations? So what's unique about maybe the study area you're interested in exploring? And then C, discuss the criteria impacting those trends. So in another way of thinking about that, what are the specific measurables that define your variables, like we described with age? Why did you select age 35 and older? Maybe it was gender. So just to offer a little thought on why you selected what you did, and then share what you found. So include some graphics and some commentary about those. And then we'll have you upload those to Blackboard in week 7. So if you encounter any questions or problems, please let me know. But the idea here is that what I'm giving you in this little tutorial work along is that you should have everything you need to conduct your trend analysis, whether you want to follow along with me or whether you want to work through this on your own and then come up with your own plan. That's completely fine. So I'm going to come back up here to the beginning where we left off, and we'll be starting then with number 3. So we'll move forward from there. And if folks want to work ahead on your own, sans my commentary, please stop now if you wish to go through that lab on your own and follow the tutorial guide and complete the application activity and then upload that to Blackboard on your own. That is fine. Otherwise, if you'd like to continue along with the recording, along with some explanations of what I'm doing and why, then stick with me and we'll try to keep this brief and as pointed as possible moving forward with the rest of the video. So I'll be back with you in just a second. All right, so for the folks who wish to continue on here with a little commentary over the remaining steps and guidelines in our tutorial, then we'll embark upon our journey together here. So again, part of our activity here will be to look at trying to draw inferences of patterns that we're seeing in our data. In other words, of our profile that we are creating with our consumer in mind. So are they changing? Are they moving? Are they staying the same? How are those patterns changing with respect to the demand, maybe of the products that your organization is selling? Products come in, products modify, the competition comes in, competition goes out, but how does the industry take shape and respond? So what we can do with almost any type of data is try to track that and make real-time decisions, or at least as current as our data would suggest, to stay on top of market trends. And so that's what this will be about. So let's go ahead and open up our ArcGIS.com, just like what we did on our virtual lab. And that will take you to your organization. Again, your setting might look a little bit different from that of mine. But then go ahead and log into that, and you'll be logging in again using your ESRI login, not your SMU login. I know I've repeated that the past several weeks, so hopefully that should be ingrained in our memories here. Then let's go ahead and select the series of those 9 dots located in the upper right-hand part of our screen there. It's called our app launcher, and then we'll select our business analyst app. So I'm going right up here to our app launcher, and then let's come down and select a business analyst. And if you do need to log in again to this, simply enter your ESRI login credentials, and that should get you in here. Now, make sure that we are set up. I just noticed from some of our prior weeks in working with business analysts, I have mine set at Canada. So I'm going to move mine back to the US. So make sure that that's set back to USA. If this is different, just use your drop down and set it back to the USA. Okay, now let's go over here to our maps, and I'm going to change my virtual lab here. I want to come back and set that up to a new application activity. And I already have one set up here, but for you, you will want to create a project. So go ahead and create and I'm on number 10 on your little tutorial guide sheet there, number 10. So once you're in the session, go ahead and create a new project called Week 7 Application Activity, or Week 7 Application Activity Lab. So go ahead and do that. And I'm just going to open up mine so I can see kind of where we're at here. And then once you see in number 11 and 12, if you want to work through those, you'll see, again, some of those GIS features, and we'll click the close button in the upper right hand portion of your window. Mine I already have a project created, so I kind of skipped over that part, but we did this back in week 6. So if you want a little more information on that, you can go back to week 6 and see what that looks like. But then let's go ahead and on number 12, access the Maps tab located at the top of your main menu, and then go ahead and go down to Create Maps. And then we're going to select the Smart Search map. In week 6, we spent some time looking at just single variables right here with our iPhone and Androids. Now we're going to use multiple variables and analyze those areas of our profile that we're interested in trying to spatially analyze. So let's go ahead and select our Smart Map Search. As that is coming up here, just to show you where we are on our tutorial guide, we're right here at number 12. Whoops. Okay, so let's move down to number 13. So that's just showing you what we had to do there to Smart Map Search. Now, once we're at number 13, we're in the Smart Map Search selection. So let's go ahead and browse our variables that you defined up above before you began. I'd asked you to think about what are your variables. And those were provided right here. So research and think about 4 to 5 data variables. So if you haven't already had a chance to think about what these would be, you can either practice with some or follow along with me, or pause and take a moment and think about what those would be for you, and then restart your video here. But again, variables are data layers containing information about the feature that we will be mapping with spatial dimensions of polygons here. So with our license, we'll be limited to 5. That's why I was suggesting people come up with 4 to 5 variables that you can use for this application activity. So pick your top 5 variables. And we spoke of the macro scaling of our analysis here, that we're not getting down to corners, street corners, or exact positions like that. We're just looking at census tracts or block groups, something like that. So here are some macro scale variables that we can think about if you're not sure. So age, income, education, ethnicity, money spent on pets, traffic counts, those types of things. So while we will be looking at a macro analysis, it's usually kind of the first stage in a trend analysis is to examine that at a big picture level, and then we can go down smaller if our purpose warrants that. So here are some micro level variables that are really unsuited for our analysis here. Would be, size of a building lot, or the number of parking spaces, or which side of the street. So we're going to be, again, focusing just on the macro level. So think bigger, not so micro oriented. Okay, let's move down to number 14. All right. So for me here, as I browse our variables, it says here that we could choose up to 5 variables over here on the left on the screen. Here's where I'm looking. And as you're looking both at the screen, or maybe you have your tutorial guide up on number 14, I'm going to do some research on Dairy Queen in Minnesota, in and around the metro area. So I'm going to try to study some plausible variables for what that defines, what DQ, Dairy Queen, defines as some of their target profile. What is their profile that governs maybe markets where Dairy Queen franchise locations could be successful. And one of the great recommendation is companies have internal knowledge of what their own business profile might look like. And we may not always be able to access that information. So sometimes what we can do is what we call reverse profile build, and that is to go examine those areas, figure out what are consistent variables that we see emerging, or what spatial patterns that we see emerging with why those, I'll just say, Culver's locations are where they are. They have a plan, but obviously they're not going to release that because it's proprietary information probably. So that's a whole nother step beyond what we're doing there, but we can draw some inferences from building a profile from where successful stores are located. But for us, we're going to try to do some research instead, which is our second option. If we're not sure and we don't have inside information, then we research. We see what we can find. So expand our knowledge base. So with that being said, let's go ahead and take a look. I'm going to come back over to my application activity guide, and let's go ahead and select this link. I did some research before, and you may want to do this as well, but I did some research on Dairy Queen, and some of the information here was provided, I think some preliminary information on Dairy Queen. As we scroll through here, we're seeing some sample site selection criteria. So they're looking at population density of at least 12,500. So as an example, population density would be a variable. 12,500 would be criteria. They also embed in here a 5-minute drive time, which is another variable we could look at, specified by a 5-minute criteria. Here's a good one for you too, average income. The variable, greater than $45,000 per year income. Criteria for our variable. So we're seeing those provided for us. Building size, that's a little bit more micro. We're not going to be worried about that, or the frontage. That's getting down into, again, the micro level. This is probably also more of a micro level, a scale that we're not really worried about at this stage. So we're looking at big picture preferences here. So in our lab guide activity here, I have a graphic on the next page that shows some of the big picture variables that we are interested in. And then the micro variables are the smaller, what I kind of call the planning variables in the green box. But we're really more so interested in the macro level here. So this came right out of the guide that we were looking at. And these top three, here are four arguably. We have population density variable, average income variable, preferred traffic generators of 20,000 vehicles per day. Those are all big picture macro variables, as well as drive time variable. 5 minutes is our criteria for our drive time variable. And then our green here are samples of those micro variables that we really aren't looking for quite at this time. So, if you're working on your own application or your own activity here instead of DQ, you might also do some research, or maybe you have some knowledge of, maybe if you're working for an organization, you may know some of those principles already. And it doesn't have to be where you're going to cite a store. It could be thinking about who might buy a particular brand of shoe apparel. It may be someone interested in new stockings. It may be interested in pet products. So a lot of different things that you could think about. But what we're trying to do is to fill out a profile for who defines our consumer ultimately, or at least a market area. So given those variables, I'm on number 15 on our lab, or on our application tutorial guide. So for me, what I'm going to look for, being that I have 4 to 5 variables I will be using for the DQ consumer and business profiling models, I'm going to be using population density, which is a variable of at least 12,500 people, and then the income, which is my variable, and then the 45,000 for criteria, and then consumer spending. Now this is one that I added in there that I know exists inside a business analyst. And so if you are unsure as to what your variables may be, like if you're interested in Burger King, we can just run a simple search for that, and you can find the number of people that went to Burger King in the last 6 months. So if you're not sure what variables exist, go ahead and type some in here. Maybe you're looking at, I don't know if there's anything out here on hiking. Let's see if there is anything. So there's shoes, sports, travel, on maybe different types of people that went backpacking or hiking. So I encourage you to explore these before you maybe get into knowing what all your variables may be if you're not sure. So go ahead and go into Business Analyst and search for some of those to get that idea. So for us here, letter C, consumer spending on DQ, this is a variable in Business Analyst, so we're looking for a large number of people. And we have yet really to quantify what large number means. So we're kind of going to have to make some educated guesses on what that is, but we just want a lot of people that spend on DQ. So next would be traffic count, and we're going to be looking at 12,000 people for our specific criteria, and then a 5-minute drive time as well. So now that we have our variables and criteria, let's go ahead and integrate those together. So let's take a look at number 17, and we will search for the first 3 variables. So as you can see, part of this is originally doing the research, and then we will see if we can find those variables. And you may not find every single variable that you're looking for, just a limitation in some of the data that's provided through Business Analyst. But I'd be surprised if you can't find 4 to 5 variables that would be that could work with what you might have. So let's start off here with a custom search right off the bat for our third variable that we mentioned above, which were the number of consumers who spend money at Dairy Queen locations. So in the graphic here, you can see what that would be, and I'll take you through how that looks. So let's go ahead and add in, I'm just going to type in here, Dairy Queen, and then search or enter. And right here, I see the number of the amount of people that went to Dairy Queen in the last 6 months. So right now you can see that this variable went into my model to be analyzed up here. Okay, so I can select apply. And while that's working, let's see here. I'm just going to pause. I'll be right back with you. And all right, everyone. So we have our DQ, our number of people that went to DQ in the last 6 months. And we'll eventually zoom into our area here in the metro, but I just want to talk you through what it is that we're seeing here. So we're seeing really just everything is in blue here. That is all the people from 3,600,000 down to the lowest of 56,000 in states now. So over the last 6 months, there were 182,000 in the state of Montana that went to a DQ. So, but obviously this will change once we get into states and then counties and zip codes, and then eventually we'll be down to our census tracts, probably, or block group. But here is our variable. Now here, if we start to change, let's say we wanted just to look at the big consumers, or where are the people that mostly visit DQ. Here we can see a lot of in the Midwest and some of the few Western states, but those are going to be the biggest consumers of those people that visit DQ locations. So what we're doing here is really setting our metrics or our criteria. In other words, what is the numeric bounding principles of our data? And so you can see why this really needs to be specific, because if we move it down too low, we are excluding a lot of potential market. But if we have it too high, that could be a lot of wasteful spending in terms of analyzing or exploring those markets. But nevertheless, in number 17, let's go in 18, let's go ahead and finish adding in some of those 3 variables that we identified in our profile. So I'm going to come back up here, and one of the other things we'll be looking at is median household income of greater than 45,000. We can see those here. So median household income. So that was our next variable. So let's go ahead and load that in. So I'm going to say up here, we'll add more variables. So let's go back over to our categories, and we will say median household income. We'll run a search for that, or you can browse that as well. But we will select, what did we have in here? My guide was a median household income. So we'll go ahead and add median household income. Where is that here? Okay, folks. So I think in the end here we had we could have used either of those options there. But if we go into the browse category, which is at the beginning here in our data browser, let's select income and then the median household income. Okay, and what you can see is that recorded a second variable for us, and our third one that we identified right off the bat here was that of that's right. Okay, it was population density. So that was one of our other variables that we identified from our research. So let's go into population, and let's see if they do have okay, population density. Not seeing that, so we may need to search for density. Okay, so 2019 population density, that will be another one that we will want to select. There's a 2019 population density. It's also, okay. Now we have 3 variables identified for us. So now let's go down and select apply. Again, we just have 3 of our variables identified, and up above here, if we come back up here, and you may want to do that as well. So here were all the variables we were going to use for our DQ analysis. So right now we have A, B, and C our variables identified. Population density, our income, our consumer spending on DQ. The other two here we will need to create. Why is it like this? I'm not really sure, but traffic count will not be a searchable variable. Instead, we will need to overlay that data with our other variables. So you'll want to follow along with my example as we continue to go along. And then we'll also generate some 5-minute drive times within the areas that we identify in A, B, and C above. So that's the direction we're going. So, and I think Business Analyst is a very robust package. There are a ton of different things you can do with the software. It just takes a lot of time behind the screen to start utilizing some of the information and figuring out what's there. So some of it isn't exactly intuitive. And I think ESRI is working on building this to be a lot more user-friendly, but they do have a ways to go to make data a little bit less clunky to integrate, I think, here overall. So I'm fully aware of that. And so anyway, let's move on here as we're looking at our 3 variables, 1, 2, and 3 in our session. So you should all have something that looks like this. I'm just going to click on my little pan tool, move over here a bit. But now we see all of our variables. And we should also note that as you move around, once we zoom into our study area, if you move around in your study area, your data will change to reflect your viewing area. So next, let's go ahead, and I'm on number 18. Let's go ahead and zoom into our study area. So let's go to census tracts. Let's go ahead and click census tracts. Or we maybe should have zoomed into Minnesota first. That might have been more appropriate. Okay, let's figure out where we are. Yeah, we need to move up. Yeah, so if you did that, my apologies. Let's back up here. We'll go to states, to the US here. And then let's go up and select our zoom in tool located in our toolbar on the right. And now let's left click, make a little box, and zoom into the metro. That's probably the better way to do it. So my apologies to you on that. Now we could take our pan tool and move around. So as you're thinking about how this would fall into what our output would be, let me just come down here to number 33. So we're almost there. So right off the bat, we have our 4 to 5 variables. And so we've done that. So for you in your approach, you will identify 4 to 5 variables similar to what we did. And then next, we're moving into our study area. And that's the step that we're on right now in and around the metro. So for you, it might just be because you're interested in an area. For us, I'm trying to select something that is maybe relevant, kind of close to home there. So once we have our area identified, then we'll move into selecting that specific criteria. So I'm trying to take you through each one of these steps that you'll need to do for your write-up. All right, so let's spend just a moment here now that we're zoomed into the metro. So we're seeing that we are on census tracts. The data is just re-queuing up here, but if you move your cursor around, you'll see the white tab at the top there says census tract. So it tells us the number of people in the last 6 months that went to a DQ. It also gives us their household income and our population density. So what we want to do is to find out, once we identify our criteria, where all of our criteria match up with our variables. And that's going to indicate to us suitable market territory. So take a look for a moment and just read through number 19, because that's the next step that we're going to work through. So, whoops, let's come back up. So we zoomed in to the size of Minneapolis for applications like this. And so earlier in the session, I was just suggesting that you may want to keep a smaller unit of your study area. And this is going to preserve our census tracts or our census block groups. So that's where we want to, that's what I'm getting at here with number 19, is that we want to try to stay to the census tracts or block groups for a scale that's easy for us to understand and work through. So here's what I was just illustrating. If you get into a scale that maybe shows Minneapolis, Minnetonka, Wayzata, New Hope, Plymouth, whatever, this is a good sample area to consider working with. So if I come back up to my area here, it might be a little bit more prudent to zoom in a little bit more here for a sample study area. Part of it is that we want to be in close to our census tracts, but we also want to not have an area that's too large and out of control for us, because in reality, depending on what it is that we're trying to analyze, no area is going to be super huge. It's going to be a little bit more refined. So something like this might be just fine, or maybe zoomed in a little bit more like I have. This is about the scale that we want to be at here. Okay. Number 20, moving on here. Number 20 will be all about selecting or starting to select and identify our criteria, which are the specific numbers in our variables that we're trying to select from. So before we do that, I just want to kind of narrate through here what it is we'll be doing. And think back to the population density variable provided by our research with Dairy Queen. They're saying 12,500 is a good number to represent and reflect DQ's preferences of a population density, or the number of people per given unit area. I do think that, personally, I have a little caveat in there. It was preferred criteria, but it might be inflated a little bit high. So keep that in mind, that the higher or the lower your actual number of people are for your criteria, you could be excluding a lot of potential market areas as well. But for now, we will use that value. But I don't think it's quite as high personally. And then also, we have variables that we can indicate or specify as greater than or equal to 45,000. And then also a large number of people. We don't know what that is. That's a drawback. We're hedging some bets here on that. But we're looking for a greater number of people. So we're trying to find good populations of what defines that consumer profile, and then just find more areas that look like that. Okay, then I did make a note here about zooming in or out. And so let's go ahead and we'll take a look at what is next to come here. So let's go in and set those to 12,500. So our population density, type in there, 12,500 or higher. Okay, that should be okay. All right. That's giving us a smaller area. That's why I think a bit of this population density value here is a little bit too high. Personally, I think it's going to be a little bit lower. And then our median household income was greater than or equal to $45,000. I'm just typing that in and then select enter. So anything $45,000 or higher, so greater than or equal to. So we're setting the lower limit. And then also for the population density to anything greater than 12,500. So 12,500 is the lowest band. The highest band is up here. We want anything that's 45,000 or higher. And you can see when we did that, some of these other little areas went away. We know that there are Dairy Queen locations out here, but they're not showing up as a preferred market area because of this population density value. That's why I think this is too high. I don't know why it was showing that in our site selection criteria, but they also might be saying that they're looking for 12,500 people within a 5-minute drive time. So there could be some possibilities with that, but this I think is a little bit off. Now the number of people that went to Dairy Queen in the last 6 months, we want a large number of people with that. So we're also going to set a band of anything that's ideally a larger number in our area here, in our viewing window. That's what this is telling us in all of our block group, our block group area, we want the greatest number of those people to try to find where there could be more. So something like that. I mean, whether it's 90 or whatever it is, we just want a good high number. Or if it arguably you could come back down and say 26, just take the whole gamut. It's not really going to make a difference. We can leave it open for now. Let's just leave it open. We're going to take, or we have anybody that went to a DQ here too. All right. So now let's come back to our application guide. And so our first three variables will show us basically what we were just looking at. And let's go down and take a look at the graphic. So here we have in red all of our macro variables. We have some of our areas defined here accordingly. Now, the only real difference is from what I have on my screen versus what you have or what I have now currently is that on the graphic here, I was in census tracts. Now I'm in block groups. You can see that there with the block groups changing. So block groups are a little bit more homogeneous, but it's a smaller geographic area. But that's okay. It doesn't really matter. Now this is the area that the model predicted. So what we're seeing here with all of the blue, our blue areas, it means all of these census tracts, what I'm looking at here, but in my window, saying that all these areas in blue, every single one right here, met, they all contain the three variables that I'm interested in, all that meet my stipulations of criteria. So all these areas have greater than 12,500 population density. All of these areas have greater than or equal to $45,000 in median household income. And all of them contain somebody that has purchased from DQ in the last 6 months. Now, if we make this a little bit more strict, you could see some of these falling away. And that's what I'm saying. Like, if we're just guessing on those, it's a tough thing to try to do. So it's always better to try to have some insight into what your criteria are and why. Okay, so these areas, in theory, according to DQ's model, would be optimal for a DQ location in or around these, or at least within five minutes. So, and that is where we then enter our drive time and our traffic analysis. Oops, there we go. So now we're going to add a drive time analysis to these areas. So the fifth variable will add, which will be our traffic count after this step of analyzing our drive time. So when we think of a drive time, we'll need to know, okay, we want to know where all of our DQ stores are first so we don't cannibalize on anyone. We'll look at that a little bit later here, but it might be beyond the scope of what you would need to do for any of this. But let's go ahead and add a pin. So what we're saying is, in order to create a drive time, we need to have a location from which we could generate a drive time from. So this pin will be a hypothetical DQ location in and amongst those three variables that fit our model. So let's go ahead and do that. We'll be using the tools on the upper right-hand side of the screen. And what I'm going to do is take this pin right here, whoops, right over here, this pin in the upper right, going to select that, and I'm going to come down and drop a pin somewhere in here. It's going to add a pin. So this is saying, all right, I'm right in the thick of these three variables that meet my criteria. So you can add multiple drive times if you want, just with multiple pins, but what you will need to do once you have a pin is to generate a drive time from each one of those. And sometimes you may not even need drive times. We just happen to be using one that's because DQ wanted to use one. So next, we will zoom into our area here, and we can always delete our pin locations and re-add them, so it's not really a big deal here. But let's go ahead and zoom in a little bit more. Okay. All right, I'm just going to scroll over, and it looks like our pin didn't get added, so we may have to try that again. So I'm going to come right down in here in the thick of it and add a pin. Okay, so once you add a pin location, we're using this as a generic way to show you how to create a hypothetical. So if DQ was somewhere in this vicinity, what would a drive time look like here? So if we come back over and look at our lab guide, if you're happy with your pin location, great. If not, now we can go ahead and create a drive time for that. So what we'll need to do that is to say create a site from our pin. So go ahead and push create site, and then we're going to select drive time. And that's what's shown here. So you could have distance rings, drive time, or even walk time. And then we'll be selecting our time in minutes because DQ said they wanted a drive time within 5 minutes. So set up your protocol just as what I have for mine. And then we'll have a sample product of this 5-minute drive time. So what we want essentially is anything within the first band of our 5 minutes. Okay, so let's set that up and we'll see what it looks like. So we're going to create site, and then we are going to select drive time, and it's already set up here for us. Then let's select apply. Now as that's working for us, that means any areas of a potential DQ should be within this red band here. So if we're getting out to the 15 minutes, that might be too far away for people to drive. So it's looking at, like, if we could have multiple pins in here and run drive times, and it's going to look like, it will look almost that any area, if I zoom in a little bit more to this drive time, this, if there was a DQ in this location here, most of these areas in green, just because of the interstates here, would be within a 10-minute drive time, but specifically we're looking at areas in red. So our general area wouldn't be too large here. It'd be kind of clustered if we had multiple pin locations. So again, you can create more pins if you want, create more drive times and see where those drive times overlap. That's completely fine. But to save a little time here, we'll just be using one pin for now. So now that we have an area here that we've examined where a DQ could be somewhere in these block groups here, let's go ahead and examine the historic traffic counts in our area. And I'm on number 24 of our lab guide. And with that being said, so that's our DQ ideal location in red, somewhere in that area. Again, macro level analysis. So let's add the historic traffic layer button, and that's the button in our toolbar located in the bottom right here. It has little cars on it. So recall from our DQ profile, which was in number 15 above there, they're looking for traffic counts of greater than 20,000 per day. So we're going to select the most recent traffic counts we can. You know, our traffic counts for the data and business analyst are as good as what they can be, but it always takes time to keep adding this data. So we're going to go back and look from 2013 to the most recent. So how are we going to do that? Let's take a look here. We'll be using this button, and then we'll set traffic count minimums to 20,000 at our lower range. Our higher range doesn't really matter, but at least 20,000. And then years of count. So we're going to move that up from historic to more relevant and more current information here. And then all road types. So let's go ahead and do that. So we're going to select our little vehicles over here, add historic traffic layer. Okay, and now we're going to say traffic count. We want at 20,000. Or we can, I think, just type that in there. 20,000. And then years, I'm going to make it just a little more relevant to 2013. All road types, and then close. So what this is saying for us here is that a lot of these roads here, we would like to try to keep our DQ location somewhere in this general area. So go ahead and zoom in. I'm on number 26 here in our lab guide. So if you want to zoom in and explore some of those areas, go ahead and zoom in a little bit. We could see where there's higher traffic counts in and around that drive time, and that would give us an indication of if we're close enough within a proximal area to be considered of a new DQ franchise location. So, all right. Number 26, you can alter the transparency of the drive time. I'll see if we can do that by selecting the pin. So if we just left click on this, and then I think that is under options if you want to edit the transparency here, and then we can either change that up or down if we wanted to, so we can see what's underneath there. And then okay, if you want to do that. That's what number 26 was about, but feel free to zoom around in there, see what's going on. You know, we have some good traffic counts over here that are at least pretty heavy on vehicles. Here we have Lake Street. Obviously, we know that that is a pretty high traffic count area, and then Lindale. So a lot of these areas in and along here could be suitable for a DQ traffic count, plus are within our population density, our people that are consuming DQ, and as well as a median household income of greater than or equal to 45,000. So in the next step here, in number 28, we just kind of, in 27, looked in and explored our data here for what we have for one potential area. And in 28, what we're looking at is part of the fun of examining an analysis to see how well we predicted. How well did our model predict the actual store locations, in this case for DQ? So if we have a DQ location that's been there for 10, 15, 20 years, odds are something successful is working in that location. If we see a lot of DQ stores or locations, or really for that matter, any business that is in a location and then businesses go out of that location very quickly, something isn't working. Now, what we don't know is that something managerial or within management, or is really that something that is more of a consumer analysis failure. So those are, we don't know. But let's go ahead and enter in up here in 28. We're going to run a search for some DQ locations. And up here, the drop down, we're going to go down to business and facility search. I'm on number 29. So we're just going to see how well our model predicted DQ locations. So I'm going to type in there Dairy Queen, just like I have there, for a business and facility search. And then let's go ahead and search those. Okay. So it's looking like we have a DQ over in this location. We have a DQ up here in this location. So that's in the mall. Now that's only just within our viewing area here. Now if we scroll one way or to the other, we might find more DQ locations. It's hard to say. Run another search. Some to the south. Thought there was another one that showed up down here. Maybe there aren't as many DQ locations as I thought, but nonetheless, it does show us that part of our model, you know, notwithstanding the mall here, at least with DQ, at least 3 that were in our area, that we're pretty darn close within, you know, if we added a pin here, this would have certainly fell within our predicted model that we were looking at for site selection, and would have fallen within 5-minute drive times pretty easily. So the one thing that didn't really give us was right along an adjacent traffic count, but it doesn't mean that that it couldn't have been somewhat close to that either. So we're not too far off in what we did here. So that's kind of interesting to see. So in number 31, whatever you're looking at, whether it's DQ, whether that's your own thing, your own little study, some things to think about might be We'll get down here. What surprised you about what you found? Do your results in your study area make sense? What could have impacted the study? Largely in this case, it might not, it might frankly just be not having corporate inside knowledge. It might be data limitations. We only have 4 or 5 variables. That's not everything. What would you maybe do differently if you could go back and do that in a different way? So think about these questions as it relates to your application activity exercise. And at this point, congratulations, you've made it through a preliminary trend analysis, and it was a little bit involved, but it was pretty small scale for that. But go back and repeat or tinker or try this out again, and change your variables, change your criteria, and see what the difference comes out with in the end for you. And another thing that you could do, anything with a trend analysis has to start with the beginning. So we were looking just at 2019 data, but really you could have projected data that maybe goes to 2024. So you could almost forecast where new market areas could be, or where market areas may change in the future, or how they've changed in the past. So this is all about trying to predict emerging markets. But again, you just have to look for more modern data than the 2019 in Business Analyst. So 33, this is the application activity we went through at the beginning. If you have any questions, please let me know. Otherwise, upload those to Blackboard with deadlines that are found in Blackboard there. And if you have any questions, please let me know. I'd be happy to coach you through any of this. And this is so exciting, and I know it's new to many of you, but practice with this and learn it, because this will be super valuable for you in your careers, adding the BI and geospatial element to what you do, the technology aspect. So otherwise, we'll see you all again soon for week 8. Have a great week.